Today's Torah talk is the new series. This is the second of this series. It's called Ideas for Life. And the ideas today are from Nachman of Breslav. So I'll mention a few things about Nachman since it's my first time uh, speaking about him in this context. Nachman was born in 1772 and he died in 1810. He lived a very short life, 38 years. There are many giants of human history who did not live so long, and amazing how much they accomplished in their short lifetime. He was born in the town of Midjibish, which is the town actually the Baal Shem Tov was from in eastern Poland, today the Ukraine. And his mother was a granddaughter of the Baal Shem Tov. That makes him a great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He was married the first time at the age of 13. He went to visit Israel, that time called um, Palestine under the Ottoman Empire, in 1798 to 1799. And in 1802, he moved to Breslav, and that's why he's known as Nachman of Breslav. And when he declared, "Today we have planted the name of the blessed Breslaver Hasidim." His main student, who basically wrote all of his works, was the name of Natan Sternholz, who's also called Natan of Breslav, who at the time was only 22 years old when he met Nachman. And in 1810, when a fire broke out in Breslav, destroying Reb Nachman's home, so actually a group of enlightened Jews, Maskilim, invited Nachman to move to Uman and live in their town, providing him housing. And at that time, of course, he was already ill. He'd lost a significant part of his family to tuberculosis, and Nachman at that time had already um, developed tuberculosis. And a few months later, he died in Uman. Actually, moving to Uman, Nachman had been passed through Uman before, and he had said this is a good place to be buried. And he was referring to the cemetery where 2,000, or some people say 20,000, Jewish martyrs who were killed by the Haydamic massacre of Uman of 1768 were buried. And so Uman has become his burial place, and many stories about that today. So, talking about Nachman, I would like to, in general, the Hasidic movement, or I would say Hasidic thinking, more than the movement. Hasidic thinkers are usually present their ideas through what I would call Kabbalistic psychology. It's all about the human soul, and Nachman, in that sense, is not unusual in this issue. However, Nachman has what I call super intellectual anti-rationalists, has a tendency also to look at things from extreme positions, which sometimes makes his thinking more interesting and more bold. So what I'd like to do, in the last 2 years of his life, Nachman decided instead of to give Hasidic sermons, he started telling stories. So, because he felt that people were not really understanding him. The famous book Sipurei Ma'asiyot, his book of stories published by Natan Sternholz, is today a classic of Hasidic stories. And in Nachman's stories, like in the early days of the Hasidic world, the stories are all about Musar Haskel. They're all stories that are come to teach us ideas. And I'll tell one short story which is not in the Sipurei Ma'asiyot, in order to give an idea of Nachman's sometimes extreme views about the world. The story is about a king whose sages approached him and told him that from what they understood looking at the astrology and what's going to happen in the future, they came to the conclusion that anybody who eats the grain for the new coming year is going to go crazy. So they had a whole meeting because the grain is going to make everybody crazy. The question is how to circumvent this and not eat the grain. So they had a little meeting, and the scholars decided, okay, maybe we'll have enough grain this year and hoard it so that we'll have enough grain to eat next year. And then the whole world might go crazy, but at least we'll be safe. But then they thought again, and the king said that doesn't make sense because if the whole world is crazy and we're sane, so the whole world is going to think that we're crazy and that they're sane. So that doesn't help anything. Okay, so they thought again what to do, and they said, fine, we will eat the grain of next year just like everybody else, and we'll go crazy like everybody else. However, before the year starts, we will put a mark on our foreheads to remind us that we are insane. So at least we will know that we're insane, but the rest of the world will not know. This story about the tainted grain is a famous Nachman story, but like all Nachman stories, it has to do about truisms of Hasidic thought. This idea actually is related to Talmudic idea. There's a Talmudic idea told in the Talmud in Ta'anit about a certain individual, I think it might have been Elazar ben Padat, who ate garlic because that's all he had. He was very poor, and he fainted and felt his soul go up to the higher world. And when he came back, the students say, "What did you see?" And he said, "I saw an upside down world. Everybody who was important in this world was not at all important in that world. And everybody important in the world to come was not even important here." Students said, "You saw the real world." Nachman is familiar, obviously, with this concept, and he takes it, as I said, to the extreme. This world, says Nachman, is Alma de Shikra. It's the world of lies. Because in this world, things that are important are not really that important. If a person has a lot of money, which might not even be their own reason, could be they inherited it. If a person looks good, also they were just born that way. If a person is famous, they could be famous being infamous. If a person knows how to sing, okay, singing is great, but so again, I'm not against these things, but the point is that the things that make people very often famous are not the intrinsic values of being human. So for Nachman, this world is a world of vanity and a world of lies. Because the real person is the one that you build. Now, in the Talmudic statement of the world of lies, it was just about the fact that we are judged in this world by trivial, shallow reasons, and therefore in this world, who's important is not really that important. For Nachman, this goes even further. And I'll explain it by another statement of Nachman, which is one of his famous 10 statements. And I'll read it to you in the translation. We all know it. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tzar me'od. It's been made into a famous song here in Israel. Know that a person has to cross through this world on a very narrow bridge. And the main thing is not to make yourself afraid. I'm quoting the way it comes from the book Mishivat Nafesh 135. Know that a person has to cross through this world on a very narrow bridge. And the main principle is not to make yourself afraid. What does that mean? This is a song which is sung. Many people know this statement of Nachman, but what does it really mean? It's not just about not being afraid. Think for a second. If the whole world is a narrow bridge, what's the point of a bridge? To get from one point to another point, right? You cross the river. You don't cross the river to go on the bridge. You go to cross the river to get you use the bridge to get to the other side. That's the point of the bridge. It connects 2 points. Nachman doesn't say that. He says the whole world is like a bridge. At least it looks like a bridge. We're getting from one point to another point. But the main thing is not to get to the other side. How do you know how long you're going to live? It's not about accomplishment. It says the main thing is not to make yourself afraid. Now, it could be understood in one of two ways. Of course, if you are afraid and you're on a narrow bridge, you could actually fall in. You need direction. And then there's a chance you won't fall off the narrow bridge. Just keep looking ahead. Don't look right and left. So for Nachman, if the world is a narrow bridge, the main thing is not to get to the other side. That's the way people of physical accomplishment, are thinking. The main thing is every step you took on that bridge, it was steps of confidence or not? Did you have direction or not? Was every step you took, was it following the values that you believe in as a human being or not? These are the important questions, not how far you came on the bridge. See, for Nachman, this world is a world of sheker, of lies, not only because people are judged by the external, where people are more interested in what you do than who you are, but also because we live in the fallacy in the imagination of external accomplishment. So you made $100 million. You're going to take it with you after 120 when you die, as King David said in the Psalms. You built a great business. And then what happens? The next generation comes and destroys it, as Ecclesiastes says, Kohelet. What is it intrinsically that a person takes with them when they leave this world? Well, it can't be accomplishment in a physical sense. Nachman says the real accomplishment is how you build yourself up as a human being. This you take with you, because this is you. So for Nachman, it's the fantasy or the fallacy of physical accomplishment is what this world is all about. Whereas the human being is really about who they are as a human being. I don't want to go into the question of whether there are other Jewish views. As I said, Nachman is a very specific view, and there's a lot to learn from him. And, in general, in Judaism, there is a belief in positive accomplishment. But Nachman is hitting a very important nerve here, a very important note, in the sense that the real accomplishment, what we take with us, is who we are as human beings. So it's not about how far you're going to walk on the bridge. Nobody knows how far they're going to walk on the bridge. But if you use each moment in the way that betters you as a human being, and you follow your principles, values, and direction, then you made every moment worth it in this world. So Nachman knew a lot about human psychology. And I'd like to read another two short excerpts. Nachman says, "It is clear that there is no despair in reality at all. There's nothing to despair about. For the very fact that a person sees themselves as far away from God, this in itself should bring one comfort. For after all, if one realized that they are far away from God, because remember, it's conceivable that one could be so distant from God that they're not even aware of it anymore. Therefore, if you're aware of the distance that you've moved away from God, even though it's true, this is important. In other words, and it's important to God, the very fact that you feel distant from God means you're on the way on a good direction. Because other people from distant from God, they don't see the problem. They don't see the problem. In this world, spiritual sensitivities are not easy to gain. Physical ones are easier. I always say if you haven't eaten for 24 hours, it's difficult. But if you haven't prayed for a month, you might feel fine. Because spiritual sensitivities take time. So if you've actually realized, and if the point hit home that you feel distant from God, that's the first inkling of the possibility of getting close, Nachman says. Says, that's good. That's step one, because a lot of people can't even come to step one. That's a big deal. So Nachman, despite the fact that sometimes he took things to the extreme in the human situation, was very surprisingly forgiving because of his understanding of the human psyche. And one last idea from Nachman. Also, one of his famous, what they call the 10 statements of Nachman. If you believe that you have the power to ruin your life, then you must also believe that you have the power to repair it. Also taken from the Shivad Nafesh, collection of Nachman statements. If you believe that you have the power to ruin your life, and maybe even think you already did it, then you must believe that you have the power to repair it. Because what you broke, you can fix. If you broke it, go ahead and fix it. Doesn't matter how long it takes, but you have the ability. And probably only you. So Nachman was, in a sense, an optimist about the human capacity of elevating themselves. But he knew that we're within the human condition. In the Hasidic world, there developed an idiom, a saying in Yiddish, that the ultimate Hasid has to be in Welt, ois Welt, meaning in the world, and at the same time transcending the world with their mind. Because we live in a world, and this world is material, and people judge by physical and material achievement. So you cannot break out of that, but you can break out of the mindset. You can transcend the world by having a different mindset. And as the Baal Shem Tov said, where your mind is, that's where you are in the end of the day. Shalom, shalom.